Thank you, Tom. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Good. Many of you will know my involvement with the British Shell Collectors Club, and it was through that organisation that David and I first met. Then, as now, I was organising the club's events, and I was contacted out of the blue by this chap from the Murray Firth who was proposing to travel all the way down to Essex to attend one of our events with some British shells. And I admit to being a little bit skeptical at the time, but I'm a great believer in giving people a chance, so I did. At the time, we were rather short of space, so I tucked David's table away in a corner of the stage at the back of the hall, practically behind a curtain, and it's something that David still ribs me about to this day. But when he started to put out his display, we soon came to realise just what he brought, and he became the focus of attention for many. He had things like Buxtonum humphreyianum, Iothia fulva, Volutopsis norvegicus, Cisurella crispata, and to name just a few. And these deep water species are things that you rarely see. David became a regular at the club's events from that day on, which I'm pleased to say. As I became more heavily involved in studying British marine molluscs, I realised that the name David McKay popped up quite regularly, and he had been involved for many years. Indeed, he used to be a Conchological Society Sea Area rep and produced a rather groundbreaking atlas as long ago as 1979. We might hear more about that later. Anyway, David and I hit it off right from our first meeting at Thaden Boys and have become close friends and collaborators, spending a lot of time out on the shore and even on small fishing boats together. I know he's got very many tales to tell, and also that he has by far the best voucher collection of British marine shells in private hands anywhere in the world. I'm sure he's going to deliver a hugely interesting talk on the subject for us today. So over to David. Welcome, David.
Can I just butt in and say first, could please people mute? It helps the bandwidth, and take off your video during the talk. Now, David, we're welcome to give your talk, The Role of Serendipity in Shell Collecting. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Tom. I'll just, there's a problem. Never mind. Last year, when Tom asked me to give a talk to the Conchological Society, I must admit I was surprised. And it was only when I started to put my talk together that I realized just how difficult it would be to put nearly 60 years of collecting into an hour's talk. But I'll do my best. And my first attempt at it lasted about 3 hours. So I have cut it in half, and I'm just going to have a walk through the shells that I have in my collection that people might not have seen or might not see too often. Most of the shells that I'm going to show you come from really very deep, well, quite deep water and very deep water. I worked in the marine laboratory for nearly 30 years. So I have my colleagues in the marine, my former colleagues in the marine laboratory collected shells for me. And now the marine laboratory still collect shells for me on their routine trawling surveys, something that I'm eternally grateful for. The In my collection, I have no depth restriction to what I keep. I consider the 200 millimeter depth contour restriction is just a biological stupidity. And I collect whatever exists in the world below extreme high water spring tides, down to whatever depth. If I get a specimen, I keep it. The slide on the screen at the present time shows what I'm looking at when I'm not looking at my screen. This is a small part of my collection. Sorry, I'm having difficulty here because let's say there are no display cabinets. Almost all my shells are kept in small plastic boxes inside the drawers that I built myself. I could have just as well titled this talk 60 Years in Search of the Perfect Plastic Box, because every time I find a suite of plastic boxes that are suitable for keeping my shells in, another company seems to stop making them. For most of the talk, I'm going to take you through a photographic walk through the drawers so that you can see some of the shells in my collection. There will be a number of asides where I have pet hobby horses that I want to express an opinion on, but most of the shells that I'm going to show, I've had a part in either finding them or identifying them, and with a few exceptions, I have bypassed the very small shells, as my photographic ability is not up to photographing small shells at all. One of the things that putting together this talk has brought home to me is that in reality, it's not my collection at all. I'm only the person that coordinated all the people who helped me along the way. First on the list, as I mentioned before, would be the marine laboratory staff who helped me by keeping shells that were a bycatch from the laboratory studies surveys for over 40 years. Many of the shells that you will see have been collected by them. Then there are the skippers and crews of the many fishing boats I have gone out to sea on to collect shells. Without their kindness, patience, and cooperation, collecting of shells from their catches would have been impossible. In particular, I attached a small net like the one in the picture to their trawls and dredges. On trawlers, they find me space on the sorting coffers so that I can collect haddock gut samples. All of them took me to sea on their normal fishing trips, absolutely free of charge. They fed me, they watered me, they provided me with duty-free alcohol if necessary. You know, their generosity is beyond limits. Many still take samples for me when I was in bed, while others keep shells and other bits and pieces of debris that might contain shells for me now, long after I've been on trips with them. I can honestly say that in all of the trips I have done, there have never been a cross word, and I have always been welcomed back another time. And last but not least is my family, who have put up with years of family holidays that had to be beside the seaside, so that I could collect tides at low tides because the holidays were always geared to be at a spring tide. Not to mention the occasional nasty smell that emanates from imperfectly cleaned shells in my shell room. I have never restricted the shells I put in for any arbitrary depth, and I'm going to start with the chitons and end with the bivalves. This first chiton, living in as I do in the north of Scotland, I'm in perfect position to collect all those species that prefer colder conditions. I'm also at the epicenter of what remains of the British fishing industry. I come from a fishing background, having been descended on both sides from fishermen. I have that essential plus for going to sea, in that I haven't suffered from seasickness since I was 15 years old. This large sponge-eating chiton, Hanley nagelfar, is about 2 centimeters long. And when my friend Jim Drury, who collected it for me on the Marine Labs vessels, gave it to me, he apologized because he cut off a bit when he was extracting it from the sponge that it was eating. And it was caught by the Marine Laboratories research vessel Scotia in a bottom trawl at over 13,000 meters deep on the side of the Rosemary Bank. It has a very distinct sculpture on its valves. This allows me to identify disarticulated valves and half-digested chitons as this species. And I have found that it's not uncommon in samples from the northern North Sea. I searched for Tonicella marmorea for a long time. I got a few small ones that I was unconvinced that were in fact the species. And I was on one of our annual collecting trips with Simon to Lewis and Harris when we were collecting at West Loch Roag. And as the tide descended in Ouigan Bay, I found a single specimen of the Tonicella marmorea, and Simon was a bit miffed because he wasn't finding any. And I suggested that because the tide was showing that as it went out, there would be no rocky shore in Ouigan Bay, just sand, that we should move a few miles along the coast to Kershire, where we seem to find Tonicella marmorea almost everywhere. Since finding it in West Loch Roag, I have found it in quite a number of places that Simon and I have visited on the west coast of Scotland. And it's a curious fact that with collecting is that once you find a species once, you seem to find it everywhere. In October 2020, I went to Rockall on the trawler Audacious. When I came to analyze the haddock gut content samples that I had collected, I noticed that there appeared to be 2 types of anatoma. One was clearly Anatoma crispata, and the other I determined to be Anatoma aspera, which I have never found on any lists of UK marine molluscs. Worms advises us to take caution when examining Anatoma crispata records because they may contain misidentifications of 3 other Anatoma species. I have not yet had time to check through all the Anatoma in my collection to see if I have 1 or more of the other 2 species, but I'll do that once I stop getting samples from that currently need analysing. Something we all need to be careful though is trying to shoehorn one specimen into the list of species in the identification manual we're using, even though they claim it to be comprehensive. You don't have to be an experienced collector to find rare shells. You just have to go to the places that those shells are. I was very disappointed in the editors of the updated version of marine gastropods, who chose to remove species from it simply because they were supposedly rare. In this time of rapid climate change, they should have sought to be adding species, not removing ones that they are already on the list. For the amateur in particular, there is a danger of misidentification if they assume that the identification manual they have is comprehensive when it is not. Where do we go to find the information that has been left out, deliberately left out of this new identification manual? The version of the guide that it replaced. This new and improved version replaced. And that doesn't make sense at all. I've only ever seen Craniopsis estuariana, and it was collected from a piece of dead deep water coral that was trawled up from 800 meters deep on the northeast edge of the Rockwell Bank by the Scotia in 2016. This specimen is about 6 millimeters long. I have another 3 specimens from the same location in my collection. Dead deep water coral is particularly good to the conchologist. All the nooks and crannies seem to keep the molluscs that live in it in place while it's in the trawl. Stones you pick up from the trawl are almost invariably have nothing. They simply have a polished surface as everything that was on them gets rolled off, it gets pulled off as they roll down the length of the trawl before arriving in the cod end. The simplest way I've found to recover the mollusk from deep water coral is to soak it in fresh water. The first time I caught some coral at Rockwell way back in 2010, I laboriously tried to pick off all the molluscs I could see. But I wanted to keep the coral as well, so I put it in a plastic trug. It rained overnight. A few days later, I thought I should check up on my coral to see that it hadn't disappeared over the side, as things have a habit of doing on boats. And when I located the truck, it was half full of water. When I removed the coral and went to pour the water away, I found that there were more molluscs at the bottom of the trug than I had originally picked off from the coral. Ever since then, the first thing I do when I get a piece of coral is put it in some fresh water. Rockwell Bank is by far the easiest place to collect live Emarginula crassa in British waters. Small specimens, along with Emarginula fissura, are common on pieces of dead coral and other debris that you pick up. The specimen shown here is 27 millimeters long, and it is the largest specimen I found at Rockwell. It was caught in 2014 at a depth of 122 meters. I also have live specimens from Rosemary Bank, and way back in 1988, I collected my single live specimen from Edrichallis Bay in the north end of the North Minch. Old dead shells are not uncommon around Scotland, but they like an awful lot of the old dead shells that you pick up in offshore gravel. I reckon it's a hangover and some fossil from the last ice age. The first time I came across this bright orange limpet was in 1970, when I was given some sediment that had been collected on another of the Marine Laboratories research vessels, the Explorer, when a 1 meter plankton net had inadvertently hit the bottom by mistake and picked up some bottom sediment as well as the plankton it was aimed at. The orange limpet was quickly identified as Iothea fulva. It's one of the most easily identified limpets in the British fauna. I collected widely on stones and other bits of hard substrate. Curiously enough, the best places to collect it from are discarded pieces of human rubbish. You know, broken fish floats. They provide an excellent habitat for it. And the most I ever saw in one place was on a broken life raft cover that was in one of the fishing for rubbish bins at Peterhead Harbour. Unfortunately, I could never find out where which fishing boat put it ashore, so I could never find out where the Iothea came from. Along with the Iothea fulva in the plankton sample of the Explorer were some very tiny limpets. I could not work out what they were. So I put them in the box along with Iothea, and they stayed there until 2011. I was analysing from samples from a trawling survey in the North Sea on the Audacious in 2011. When I found some more tiny limpets, and they triggered my memory of those that I had collected in 1970. I needed to make a real effort to work out what they were. And with some assistance from the National Museums of Scotland, I identified them as Levitella laterocompressa. It only took 41 years. Solariella cincta is the only mollusk species in my collection that I put a determined effort into to find. During 2013 and 2014, I tried to arrange as many trips as possible that were going to fish along the deep water edge to the west of the Northern Isles, where I thought I was most likely to find it. But on none of those trips did I even get a fragment. In July 2015, in a last desperate effort, I organised a trip on the Carina. We sailed from Macduff and headed north-northeast, not the direction I thought we expected to go. And it turned out we weren't going to fish the edge of the deep water edge. We were going as far north as possible within the UK EEZ, away 90 to 100 miles northeast of Shetland, to fish for Greenland halibut, and redfish. We were fishing at a depth. We would be fishing at a depth that I wouldn't catch any haddock. So I would have to rely on what came up on my small net. I was a bit pessimistic because my small net, when it's on trawls, has a very sporadic efficiency. On sometimes I get quite a lot of material, but quite a lot of other times I get nothing. On this trip, my small mesh worked reasonably well. I got something in it for more than half of the hauls, and I caught these Solariella cincta, 90 miles northeast of Shetland, and about 511 meters of water. This second Solariella, I didn't collect at all, but I collected the shell grit that it came from. I gave it to my friend Adrian Brokenshire because he spends what appears to be half his life looking at shell grit. And the sample came off the Roche Marie and was collected with 3 and a bit miles east by north of Aileen Troddy, which is at the north end of Skye in the North Minch, from a depth of about 76 meters. I examined the shell, some shell sand from the haul, but I get bored after a while looking at shell sand. If I stop finding anything new, I stop looking at the shell sand. Adrian put a lot more effort in me and found the specimens of this tiny Solariella, which Simon he managed to get identified as Solariella obscura. Adrian, in his generosity, he gave me back one of the specimens, for which I thank him very much. This is one of my prized possessions. My 2 specimens come from 1,403 meters deep on the edge of the Rosemary Bank. I had them for quite a while. I couldn't get anywhere close to an identification. There doesn't appear to be a monograph of deepwater archaeogastropoda. There's one for the 2 for the mesogastropods and 1 for the neogastropods, but the archaeogastropods have been left behind. So I had no way of identifying it. I was visiting the Cardiff Museum with some bivalves that I had, and they suggested that the only way to find any answers was simply to go spend some time in their library and go through some of the ancient reports of trawling and sampling in deep water. I did it, and by luck or good fortune, I found a specimen in the reports of the expeditions of the Travailleur and Talisman by Locard in the 1980s that perfectly matched my Margarites Lucia, as I now was able to call it. This Margarites striatus, I dredged off Sand End the village that I was brought up in, which is about 5 miles from where I live. In the sample, there were also Lepita caica and Iotha fulva, but I suspect they were all subfossil, dating back to the last ice age. I collected live specimens on the shore of the species in Iceland in 2013, when I stopped over for a few days collecting on my way back from the United States. Danilia ottaviana is one of the rare shells that I first found. I found it way back in the days I was working in the marine laboratory, in another plankton sample that had collided with the bottom, where the sampler had collided with the bottom. And in the last few years, I found it in many samples that I've collected from St Kilda north to North Rona, but always on the Scottish side of the specimens are all dead. They look reasonably fresh, but I have never found any live ones. Live specimens are quite common on pieces of deep water trawled up at Rockall, and that's what I've used in this photograph. Paleostoma formosa, or as it's sometimes known, occidentale, is a northern species that makes it south as far as the Minches on the Murray Firth in the north of Scotland. In the time I have been collecting this species, this species seems to be getting scarcer in its more southern reaches, and only appears as dead shells. Proving that a species no longer lives in an area is much harder than proving that it lives. It's much harder to prove that the species has gone, even because shells last a long time in the environment. I dredge shells up in the Murray Firth that date back to the last ice age almost every time I dredge. The next species is the obverse of the disappearing coin, and it's the Caleostoma granulatum. I first collected it in 1993 and 1994. I collected 3 specimens in the Minches and 1 east of Orkney. I didn't do any collecting for the next 10 years, 15 years. But in the 15 years since I moved to Portnocky, I have collected well over 100 specimens. I have collected specimens from the Firth of Forth all the way north in the North Sea, Shetland, and all the way south again down the west coast to the Firth of Clyde. This species is thought not to have a planktonic stage. And I still can't get my head around how it has spread these hundreds of nautical miles in that time. And I still get a thrill with every live one I find. This is Calliotropus ote. It was trawled up by the Scotia from 1,800 meters deep on the edge of Rosemary Bank in 2018. The Marine Laboratory has been doing surveys along the continental shelf edge from Muckleflugga in the north, south to Donegal, and all the way around Rocklebank for the past 14 years. So far, I only have Calliotropus otoi from Rosemary Bank. Trachytropus borealis is another species that occurs frequently as dead shells in shell grit and in samples taken in the gravel on scalloped ridges. I suspect many of them are fossil. It occurs quite commonly live in the northern North Sea, and particularly in the Norwegian sector up on the Viking Bank in those ways. This is, though it doesn't look like it, a close relative of Trachytropus and the Capulus hungaricus. It's Torrelia vestita, and it was caught these were caught on the Viking Bank. And I suppose if you were being picky, you would say they were Norwegian rather than British. But I am old enough to think that the whole of the North Sea is not the German Ocean, but the British Ocean. And I also have a specimen of this species from the Wyville-Thompson Ridge, but this time at a depth of 829 meters. Finding Velutina plicatalis is not easy. In my 40 years of collecting, I have found it 9 times. This photograph is of the time that I found it first on Whiten Head Bank in 1972. I was on a trawling trip to survey sand eel stocks, and it shows the way things have changed. We were surveying sand eel stocks to estimate whether they could be used to catch, to support a fishery for fish meal, an industrial fishery for fish meal. Looking for an industrial fishery for anything nowadays is beyond the pale. But somehow the gear that we had on the research vessel wasn't working properly, and a lot of the times that we were fishing, it was acting like a huge dredge. When you're fishing for sand eels, you use a net with a 1/4 of an inch mesh bag. So anything that goes in through the mouth of the net ends up in the cod end. And sometimes a number of hauls we made, all that we caught were about 200 weights of gravel. I had a great time. This is, well, I suppose technically could be classed as one of my failures. I collected this mollusk on the Rockall Bank on the Audacious and thought it was a dorid, but could not find any description to match it. I was looking in entirely the wrong place. I eventually realized that it was a lamellarid called Cryptoconcha pellucida. It had been collected from a depth of 100. It has been collected from a depth of 179 to 627 meters in the Faroe Shetland Channel around the Rosemary Bank and Rockall Bank. This species was first described from the west side of the Atlantic. The specimen they figured is about 40 millimeters long. It has a very fragile internal shell, which I've tried to dissect out on a number of occasions, and every time I try, you see the residue of the shell, but the shell itself has been totally destroyed. I've collected Serendipity on and off for the last 20 years, no, 30 years. It occurs sporadically in scallop dredges. Normally where you catch quite a lot of Alcyonium digitata, dead man's fingers, but it's prey species. According to all the literature, it occurs on the west coast, up as far north as Orkney. The two figured on the slide came from 9 miles east of Flamborough Head. I was on a scallop boat fishing out of Hartlepool, and one came up in my small net, and then one of the deck hands, I showed it to the crew because I was so delighted with finding it. And it was such a surprise that I thought I had to tell somebody. And one of the deck hands, while sorting the catch for the scallops, started picking them out. And at the end of one haul, he had 6. And by the end of the trip, I had about 25. You know, so. And a few weeks later, I went to join the same boat, the Roche Marie, because it had moved north to fish out of Fraserburgh, because the scallops down at off the English coast had spawned. And so that they were getting a much poorer price for them than they did for the ones up at Fraserburgh. And the same deckhand had picked out the ones down at Scarborough. He said, "I've got something for you." And he went to the boat's freezer and took out a bag with about 10 specimens from the Dog Hole, a fishing ground about 10 miles southeast of Aberdeen. So this is another of this is the first difficult to find shell that I collected. I collected it in the north sound of Orkney, on a small fishing bit called the Mara, curiously enough, for another sand eel survey. And I have specimens, live specimens. It was caught crabbed. I have live specimens from the North Sea, from as far from east of Shetland, all the way south to the German Bight. But I only ever saw a single dead specimen from the North Bench on the west coast, and that was collected in 1971. In late September 2014, I travelled into Aberdeen to pick up the molluscs that had been collected on the Scotia on her latest trawl survey of the continental slope. This was first time they had gone north, doing a series of transects perpendicular to the slope from the north of Muckleflugga in the Shetland Islands south to Wyville Thompson Ridge. Jim Drury, my contact in the marine laboratory in Aberdeen, fetched a cardboard box out of the freezer and opened it. And I looked into a treasure trove of gastropod molluscs, many of which you will see later on in this presentation. This is Bulbus fragilis, and it was caught 53 miles northwest of Muckleflugga in the Shetlands. I couldn't wait to get home to thaw out the box and get into and find out exactly what was there. And quite a few of the species that were in the box will they turn up later in this presentation. This shell is Polynices pallidus. It's not that difficult to identify when it's a reasonable size, but when it's small, it's very easy to confuse it with the Polynices polyanus, because the distinguishing feature is the size of the umbilicus, and the smaller the shell, the less the difference in size in the umbilicus. This specimen was recovered from a haddock gut sample 72 miles east by south of Fetler in 2018. Up until I got this specimen, I had quite a lot of specimens of this species that I had collected crabbed, and they obviously had been crabbed several times because they were in a very, very poor condition. This Tectonatica clausa was another species collected on the same trip as the Solariala cincta. It can be easily identified from the other UK naticids, and it has no umbilicus at all, and it has a calcareous operculum. I have other species from the Norwegian sector of the North Sea. In 2008, I had occasion to go to the marine, to go visit the marine laboratory for the first time since I had retired in 1994. I wanted to use their library, which was extensive, because I wanted to consult the reports of the Challenger expedition to see exactly what gear they used for their deep water dredging. The gear was virtually identical to a normal naturalist dredge, with some bits and pieces of sisal rope added to the end that tangled up things like starfish and so forth. So it was a wasted journey, but to a great extent. But on the way out from the library, I bumped into a colleague of mine with whom I had spent many days, many weeks, in fact, on routine surveys on research vessels, and While I was at the marine laboratory, he was one of the members of staff that regularly collected shells for me when on trips that I wasn't there. And he asked, why didn't you never ask us to collect shells once you retired? And I said, well, I had retired, I had left. I couldn't expect the perks of being a member of staff once I had chosen not to be a member of staff. And he said that I was being entirely stupid, which isn't a rare event. And that he would, if I wanted, he would read, because he now managed the routine survey programs, he would reinstate the collection of shells for me with immediate effect. I still get samples of the routine surveys, even though there are no one in the laboratory, working in the laboratory was there when I worked there. These two Galeodea rugosa I got from my now friend Jim Drury, who wasn't involved in the surveys of the continental shelf and was having all sorts of difficulty identifying the molluscs that they caught. And we came to an arrangement that he would bring back the molluscs, I would identify them, I would tell him what they were, he would keep a note of it, and I would keep the shells. Works for me, worked for him. So these two Galeodea came from a northwest St Kilda. The live collected one in 2008 and the dead shell in 2015. This is a long way north of the published distribution of the species, which stops on the west coast of Ireland and round about the Porcupine Bight. On the two trips that I have done to the Porcupine Bight, on the Nephrops trawler, Apollo, which is registered in Scotland and is a Scottish vessel, a Scottish crew, Galeodea rugosa was the second most abundant mollusk in the catches. Buxnum humphreyianum was the commonest. This Ranella olearium also came off the Porcupine Bight and also off the Apollo, but it came off when I wasn't there. I was out in June in 2014, and in August I got an email from Mike Reid, the skipper, with a photograph of this shell, this whelk, asking if I was interested in it. Did I want it? And what was it? And I quickly identified it as Ranella olearium, and they said to Mike, yes, if it was not too much of a problem, I would really like the shell, and thank you very much. I got another 3 specimens of it from the same area in 2015, and I believe that this is as far north as the species has ever been recorded on the east side of the Atlantic. But you don't have to go a long way from home to find something that has traveled or appears to be a long way from home. These two little shells, one's about 6 millimeters and the other was 4, I collected this year in April from 22 miles east-northeast of Fraserburgh. And and with the help of Simon Taylor, We have decided that they're Cerathiopsis barleyi. It's really a long way from home because it normally lives off the southwest coast of England. This is one of I would think, the most elegant shells that I have in my possession. It's a beautiful tapered spiral with lovely sculpture. These two specimens were collected 88 miles east by south of the Shetland Isles and are Cerathiella macula. I have other specimens from Rockall Bank and that are much smaller. These appear to be just about, if not bigger than the maximum size for the species. I only have 5 dead shells of this species, Elaeococcus macandrii, but I wouldn't part with those 5 specimens for love nor money. It's one of the most difficult shells to find in the Northeast Atlantic. I have two from Rockall Bank, one from Rosemary Bank, and one from east-northeast of the Shetland Islands. This is another Arctic species that just creeps into the far north of the North Sea. This one was collected 88 miles east by south of Muckleflugga in Shetland, and I've also had it from the Hatton and Rockall banks, and it's called Umatula artica. This next specimen is a specimen of Marcellorea adversa. I caught it in Loch Snizort in Skye when I was scallop dredging. The first Marcellorea adversa I ever collected was in a plankton sampler that crashed into a peak 13 miles west of the South Uist. The Marcellorea was in perfect condition, but the plankton sampler was absolutely wrecked. I couldn't believe it when I caught so many of this epitonium. This is supposedly the scarcest of epitonium in British waters, Epitonium trevelyanum, and it occurs in more than half the haddock gut contact samples I collect from the northern North Sea and west of Orkney and on the Rockall Bank. Collecting live ones is another matter. The dead ones are reasonably large, but I've never seen a live one bigger than 3 millimeters. Polyella stenosoma is another species that, according to some of the literature, hadn't been found since Victorian times. And I was quite surprised when I was regularly finding it in the North Sea east of Shetland. The two specimens figured come from about 143 miles east of Fair Isle. And now we're back to the really deep water specimens. We're back to the cardboard box. These were the commonest molluscs in the cardboard box I was given in 2014, and they're Buxnum hydrophanum. They're very easily identified by the fact that they have an almost circular operculum. The species is more associated with Greenland and the British Isles. And the latitudes would lead you to believe that they're a long way from home. But once I had identified them, and I was discussing it with Jim Drury, my friend, and he said the water temperatures where they were getting these gastropods was below zero. Although they were only 60 degrees north, the environment that the shells were in was positively Arctic. This is another Buxnum, not caught on the 2014 survey, but caught in the 2018 survey, and it was taken on the Wyville-Thompson Ridge. Pardon my pronunciation, but I have great difficulty getting my tongue around it. It's Buxnum kugelnerudi, and it was described by Boucher and Warren in 1985. Its published distribution is from North Norway to the Davis Straits. This is another recently described a species. It was described by Warren and Smith in 2006 from the deep water just off Barra Head. This specimen was caught to the east of Rockall Bank in 2011 from about 750 meters. I have other specimens from off Barra Head and dead specimens from northwest of the Butter Lewis and west of Donegal. These Beringius oceana were also trawled up on the 2014 survey. They were found along with the Buxnum hydrophanum in almost all the hauls that were done in the Faroe Shetland Channel and on the Wyville-Thompson Ridge. In their 2006 paper, Warren and Smith suggest that Beringius oceana was a circumpolar species, and all the reports in the literature that of that species from further south were erroneous. When you're looking at the environment that a species lives in, the temperature that they live in is much more important than the latitude. These Beringius oceana from the Faroe Shetland Channel were living in waters that were between 0 and minus 0.5 degree Celsius. They were in a perfectly Arctic environment. Beringius tertoni lives in the North Sea. I have had it from many positions in the North Sea, but I have never seen it anywhere from west of Scotland. I have specimens of the Colus islandicus from almost everywhere around Scotland. And I have from the northern North Sea, from the west coast, along the continental slope, from all the way south to southwest of Barra Head, and on and around Rockall Bank. It's I've also found it in the Porcupine Bight. Perfect specimens are very hard to come by, as the apex is extremely is liable to be knocked off. I was on the venture to fishing east of the Orkneys, and we picked up some shells in the stone trap on the trawl. Out of them, I picked up a perfect, absolutely perfect Colus islandicus. I was carrying it carefully along the deck, which was covered in trawl gear, when I tripped and fell, and the perfect specimen was perfect no more. This is another of the deep water bivalves, deep water gastropods that came from the 2014 survey, and it's Colus sabini, and it's was in a number of halls. All of the specimens that were in the box had the same feature, which is an exceptionally eroded apex. So since the 2014, I have collected it from the Rosemary Bank as well, but they were juveniles and they were in a much better condition. This is Colus turgidulus, another Arctic species that, curiously enough, was first described from the Faroe Shetland Channel. They were collected in 930 meters in 2014. That cruise in 2014 is almost unique in the 14-year survey that the Marine Laboratory have been doing on the continental slope. It's unique because of the number of molluscs that it caught. From the surveys that it has done south of the Wyville-Thomson Ridge, you get 1 or 2 species of molluscs in every haul and 1 or 2 specimens. Very seldom do you get more than 4. From that survey in 2014, one of the hauls had 115, if I remember correctly, specimens of Buxenum hydrophanum. Something in the environment, in this cold water environment, makes buxenids thrive. And this Animalocypho virgata was the single specimen I have of it, and it was caught from the Faroe Shetland Channel when the Scotia did some more work up there in 2018. All the specimens, all the buxenids that I have from the deep water, I required assistance in identifying. And that assistance came from Cohen Frausen. I would have struggled to identify them myself, and I'm extremely grateful to to Cohen for his help. This is a very sought after buxonid, Liomesus ovum. And for the life of me, I can't understand why so many people are fascinated by it. It's probably the commonest shell buxonid that I collected in Rockall Bank. It's everywhere. It comes up quite often with the burrowing anemones attached to it. It's been the anchor point for burrowing anemones. And I think that's why it's caught, because it makes the whole complex big enough to be retained within the net's meshes. And one of the enormous differences between research vessel trawls and commercial vessel trawls is that research vessel trawls have a cod end size of 20 millimeters, less than an inch. Modern whitefish trawls have a minimum mesh size of 130 millimeters, more than 6 times the size. Almost nothing now is retained, no molluscs are retained by fish trawls other than the biggest Neptunia antiqua and Pecten maximus. Neptunia dyspecta is reasonably common along the deep water edge, all the way from the Shetlands south to Barra Head, and I also have it from Porcupine Bank. It's even commoner on the Rockall Bank, where it occurs in depths as little as 180 meters. It is another northern species. It's a direct competitor with the red whelk in Neptunia antiqua in the Scottish waters. Brasilia berniciensis was a species that gave me a lot of grief. It gave me a lot of grief because the descriptions contained in the literature are all of the one from the North Sea, the shallower water in the North Sea and on the west coast of Scotland. They're quite sturdy, stocky, and squat. Their final whorl makes up more than half of the height of the shell. You get a similar species, similar specimens of when you fish on in the Porcupine Bank, but the shell is much more slender, and it has more whorls, and it looks as though it should be a different species. And then if you fish deep water, in the deep water down to 1,000 meters west of Barra Head, you get one that's even more slender and with more whorls. And all these three species all these three morphs are considered to be the same species. The only species that I can think of that has a similar amount of variability in it is Buxtonum undata. Pericypho fenestratus is quite common as a dead shell, but I have only collected it 3 times live, and every time it has been on the Rosemary Bank. It looks at first sight like a Buxtonum, and it confused me for quite some time. Turbolachesis is the only shell in my collection that I have bought. So I do have a number of them, which is barred. And if it was the only specimen that I had of it in my collection, it wouldn't qualify to be in it. But I bought it in 2013 for an exorbitant price. And then in 2014, from the cardboard box from the Scotia, I got 7 specimens from 4 hauls for a parsimonious Scot. You know, it felt like an insult. These 2 buxtonids are Pericypho moabii, another deep water buxtonid that occurs in the north of Shetland on the Rosemary Bank and out along the deep water edge west of the Hebrides, from depths from 500 to 1500 meters. These 2 came from the east side of Rockall, from similar depths. I first collected Volutopsis norvegicus from 80 miles east of Eyemouth. It was on one of the first routine trawling surveys I was on in 1973. It came from a haul in which I had Liomesis ovum, Beringius tertoni, Volutopsis beringius, Colus graculus, Neptunia antiqua, and Buxtonum undatum. Almost the whole gambit of the British shallow water buxtonids in one haul. The sampling I have done in the North Sea recently indicates that it doesn't occur as a live animal that far south anymore, and most of the live Buxtonum, most of the live Volutopsis norvegicus I get are from east of Shetland and east of Orkney. This is another Volutopsis. When I spoke to Jim Drury after my visit to the Marine Laboratory in 2008, some of the shells that he handed me, one of them looked like this, and I didn't think it was Volutopsis norvegicus. It didn't look like Volutopsis norvegicus. So I took it with me to the autumn British Shell Club meeting and showed it to Colin Frozen, and he immediately said it couldn't be Voluitopsis because it had a spiral sculpture on it. So we have proposed that was a new species called Voluitopsis scotii, and it's called Voluitopsis scotii after the Fisheries Research Vessel Scotia. It's since been collected from all around Rockall Bank and on the Hatton Bank. And it highlights to me that the dangers of carrying out surveys using a single sampling tool. Lots of work has been done in the Rockall Trough and on the west of Scotland on the fauna of deep water. Yet this large gastropod mollusk has remained undiscovered until 2008. And I believe it remained undiscovered until 2008 because the sampling that was done to look at the benthic fauna of the Rockall Trough was all done using grabs or core samplers. Grabs and core samplers take a very small sample of the bottom. The chance of you getting a large animal in a small 10th of a millimeter square sample are very, very low. And that's why, that's why anybody planning to look at the molluscan fauna of anywhere needs to choose a large range of sampling gear so that it gears its sample size to the distribution of the animals that it's trying to sample. If you sample with a trawl, you sample a big area, so the chances of getting animals that are spread widely apart is very high. If you sample with something with a very small area, your chances of getting that animal is very, very low. These Adamite Virigula are one of the only two samples I have of this gastropod. They were collected on the fishing vessel Carina away in the far northeast corner of the UK's EEZ. Amphissa acousticostata is one of the more widespread small gastropods that occur in deepish water around Scotland. They occur in the North Sea, around all the way down the west coast as far as St Kilda and out on the Rockall Bank. You know, at Rockall I recovered 20 specimens from a small clump of hydroids the one trip I was on. I've also collected specimens on it on the Porcupine Bight west of Ireland. I collected this Spirotropus modiolus when I was on a trawling trip on the fishing vessel Venture 2. It was on the first trawling trip that I did in deep water, a commercial trawling trip that I did in deep water, and we were fishing for monkfish and black scabbard. When I did it, I had not perfected my small net for attaching to trawls, and I was restricted in collecting what came up in the trawl itself. And I was quite surprised when one of the deckhands came along and handed me this small white shell, which I had no idea what it was at the time, and asked if I was interested in it. And I said, yes. He said, and I said, have you seen any more? He says, yeah, it comes up in the between the rubber rings on the foot rope quite often. And by the end of the trip, I had about 6 specimens which had come up that way, which added considerably to how well I thought the trip had gone. These Typhomangelia nivalis, this specimen comes from the center of the northern North Sea, about 80 miles east of Shetland. I have about 6 specimens, all of which were collected dead, and all of which come from that small area of the North Sea. The shells figured in the next this and the next 2 slides came from the trip I did to the far northeast corner of the Scottish, British EEZ, and they're all members of the genus Onopota. This is another one, Onopota scalaris, and these are Onopota trevelliana. This is my favorite shell collected on that trip, and probably the most favorite, my favorite shell that I've collected ever, and it's Pleurotomela packardi. I will pass on quite quickly through the rest of the slides because I'm well over time. And these are some Raphatoma that were caught on the Nun Bank in 1972. These are some more Raphatoma. This used to be this specimen used to be classified as a Raphatoma purpurea. It is now identified as Raphatoma bourguignati. These are proper Raphatoma purpurea collected from the Kilberry in Argyll. And this is Raphatoma formosa. I've had specimens of this type for a considerable length of time, and I didn't know what they were until I was pointed in the direction of the Conchological Society's book celebrating the species that John Jeffries had named. And it's in that book and figured as the Difranchia reticulata var formosa. In a review of the Raphatoma species by Faso et al. And Allen 2019, it was raised to species level. So now it's called Raphatoma formosa. And I don't know what it was called before that because it doesn't look like anything else. And this is another rare turrid. It's Thesbia nana. This is the only slide of a pteropod that I have in this thing. I caught this whole petri dish full of Cliocuspidata, about 66 miles north of Cape Wrath in Scotland, way back in about 6 years ago now, and it was I've never seen so many. It was in haddock gut contents. Haddocks don't normally eat plankton, but some haddocks had been eating quite a lot of these planktonic molluscs. This is the largest UK British scephopod. It's Antalus agilis. It's the specimen's about 6.5 millimeters, 6.5 centimeters, and it was caught west of Barrowhead. I caught when I just finished a trip on the Shetland waters on the trawler Russetane, and I was working up samples. I had picked these olive green nucleolids out, thinking that they were nucleolinidosa. But when I got back and looked at them under the microscope, they had a smooth edge. They couldn't be nucleolinidosa. And I think they're a species that is previously undescribed from the Scottish waters. I decided they were Nucleolid decipiens, which is has been described from the continental slope off the Algarve, but I have no confirmation of that fact. The next three slides are pictures of Yoldiellas that were caught in collected from the stomach contents of a deep water fish called Lycodes atlanticus. This first one is Yoldiella solidula. The next one's Yoldiella incala, and this last one is Yoldiella nana. These in April this year, my friend Ian Anderson, who works on the Audacious, emailed me asking if I wanted a piece of deep water coral from north of Muckleflugga, and I collected it and brought it back, and there were about 50 of this these Bentharca nodulosa on it. And it's quite common on on harder bottoms around the Shetland Isles and down the west coast to St Kilda, and it's quite common on the outer Rockall as well. This is Limopsis aurita. And this is Limopsis cristata. This is a tiny Limopsis that lives in deep water, and it reaches about 4 millimeters in length. I was at sea on the venture at Rockhall, and I was on the trawl deck as usual, hiding in a corner, because the trawl deck, when the trawl is being hauled, is a dangerous place. And all of a sudden the trawl, they stopped hauling the trawl. It was stuck. Something was stopping it coming in through the gap in the rail on the stern. And they eventually, when they got it cleared, the object that was stopping the trawl coming aboard was this large lump of whalebone that I'm sitting beside on the it was stuck. It was too big to come through the hole. And on it, there are all these little dark patches. These little dark patches are Adipicola simpsoni. They live exclusively on the skeletons of dead cetaceans, where they live indirectly on the hydrocarbons that are contained within the whale skeletons. The big clump on the left, if you look at it closely, the animals in the middle seem to be bigger than the ones towards towards the margins, and I think this suggests that there have been new settlement around the original settlement to make use of this resource. It's an extremely difficult animal to find because it has such a clumped distribution. It's not evenly described, spread over a huge area of sediment. It's on this one area that has the dead cetacean skeleton on it. And then you have got a long, long way to go to get another dead cetacean skeleton. It must be a successful life model because this species looks to be quite successful, although it is very difficult for the conchologist to collect. This is a relative of the Adipicola. It's Idasola argentea, and it was collected from a piece of waterlogged wood west on the Porcupine Bight. This is the first mollusk that any of my colleagues at the Marine Laboratory collected for me. It's an Antrina fragilis, and it comes from east of Copensay. And this is another Antrina fragilis that I collected a few years later. I've put it in this collection because it's only 38 millimeters high. This Antrina came out of the cod end of a net that had stuck on the bottom and came up with a boulder well over a ton in weight inside in it. Once the cod end was opened and the boulder extracted, in amongst the few fish that were also in the net was this Antrina. And if a shell collector ever needed lady luck on his side, I had her there today, that day. No talk on Scottish shells, whatever the context, would be complete without the Nivea, Chlamys nivea. It's was described by Professor William McGilvray in 1825. Professor McGilvray could be described as the father of Scottish conchology. It is the only truly Scottish species or Scottish species, the variety, because it occurs only in Scotland. It occurs almost exclusively on the west coast of Scotland between Argyll and Cape Wrath. So I have collected a single specimen from Orkney in 2017. I collected these Chlamys sulcata on the Audacious in a couple of years back. The net came up with a large lump of a gill net stuck in the bag, and the skipper asked one of the deckhands to get it out for me because he knew I liked discarded gill net because it contains a lot of interesting molluscs. I got 9 specimens of Chlamys sulcata from that lump of gill net. I would have got more, but the weather conditions on the day were horrendous. It was blowing a force 9 gale. There was water swilling everywhere on the Audacious's trawl deck, and I was all set to sit there and work my way through this lump of gill net while the boat was towing, until the skipper in those uncertain terms says, "You can't sit here there in that weather on the trawl deck on your own. Off." So I could do nothing else but leave the gill net where it was and go down with the rest of the crew onto the fish working deck. So I had a look at it, the gill net again, when I come back up, 5 hours later, when we hauled the net again. But by that time, there was nothing left. The gill net was fully washed clean by the water washing across the deck. These were the other species I collected from the gill net. I got the Marginula crassa, Chlamys declopecten, vitreus, and and Amphissa acuticostata would make anybody's shell collecting day, let alone mine. These are 2 specimens of Chlamys striatum. I chose them because one is the first one I ever collected, which came from Loch Vegan in 1976, and the biggest one I have, which came from northeast of England in 2011. Well, it's also here because it relates to the next species, Chlamys furtivum. For a long time, I couldn't identify the Chlamys Paleolum furtivum from the specimens that I was collecting. They all just appeared to be variations of Chlamys of Paleolum striatum. Some had ribs and were and spines, and some were smooth, but there didn't seem to be anything that made a real differentiation possible until I was at the vast, the final Scottish Shell Show in July 2010, with nothing better to do because there was nobody there. I decided I would have another look at the spare Paleolum striatum that I'd taken down to the show. And with the help of Rika Gotals, we actually managed to divide the Paleolums into two groups that made sense. And those groups were Paleolum furtivum, which had spines and a microsculpture that was irregular and looked like a whole row of sausages, and another group, some which had spines and some which didn't, that had a microsculpture that looked like a regular lattice. And so the two species can be separated by the microsculpture, not the presence or absence of spines. These are some Declopecten vitreus, the ones in Scottish waters from around the Rockall and up the deep water edge, are all sculptured. Well, if you go to the Borgerman Bight, they're all perfectly smooth. This is a Similipecten similis, which is another pectinid which is widespread. It was described by I can't remember now. It's very common in Scottish waters, particularly on the east coast of Scotland. And this is a very elusive small bivalve Lamea sarsi. I've only ever found it in some sediment samples that I was given from Rockall. This is a Tridont elliptica. It occurs almost everywhere and around Scotland as a dead subfossil. It's quite the only places that I found it to be actually living as a mollusk are in some of the sea lochs. This one came from the Dorney in Loch Alsh when I collected there on one day that I wasn't going to get the sky in time to collect at low water, so I simply stopped half an hour before the time of low water and went down on the beach where I stopped, and it happened to be at Dorney. This is Lutraria angustior, which occurs all the way up the west coast of Scotland, to the Orkney Isles, and then down into Moray Firth, and as far south as the Firth of Forth. Sampling and collecting deep water bivalves like Lutraria angustior is an absolute nightmare for the amateur collector. They live deeply burrowed, just below mostly just below low water, and there's just simply you simply have to rely on catching the occasional dead shell, or being there on occasion when there is a big wreck of molluscs following fortuitous combination of wind and tide that washes them out of the substrate. I would, in 1989, I was the observer on a survey, a suction dredge survey for deep burrowing molluscs, and that's the first time that I ever saw this specimen alive and in numbers. This is the catch from one hole with the suction dredge that we made in Scapa Bay, and as well as Latreria angustior, there's Maya truncata, Ensis arcuatus, and various deep burrowing venerids. As a conchologist and a shell collector, it was like being in a sweet shop with as much money as you wanted. This is Archipela bilostina. It occurs widely in the northern North Sea and down the west coast of Scotland, as far as the Minches. I caught a single specimen last year off Bucky, where I was in the last place I expected to find it. This is Glossus humanus. The specimen on the left was the first specimen I ever had. I picked it up off the deck of the Gold Seeker, another of the Marine Laboratories research vessels, which was doing a survey of nephrops stocks in the Clyde. And the one on the left I caught in 2020, 110 miles east by south of Aberdeen, and it's a juvenile which is only 25 millimeters in length. Molluscs loscombiana is another of these species that you find absolutely fortuitously. It's a pholid that lives offshore. It lives where I find it is in stones like mudstones that come up in the scallop dredges, and you amongst the whole panoply of stones that come out of the scallop dredge, if you see a mudstone or a piece of red sandstone, you look for the small holes, and when you break them open, you find the Pholididia loscombiana. This is the first Xylophaga prey stands that I ever got. I got it from a Dutchman called Wiebe Takima in April 2016, who came and knocked on the window of my shell room one Saturday. He had come over to Scotland to do some collecting and had been in Peterhead and picked these Xylophaga out of a piece of waterlogged timber that had been landed in the fishing for rubbish bins at Peterhead. I included it because just a few years later, I was phoned up by the crew of the Audacious saying that they had a piece of timber that they thought had molluscs in it, and they were in Fraserburgh, and if I wanted, I could come and pick it up. I went and picked up the piece of timber, which was about 3 foot long and about 6 inches in diameter, and yeah, it did have what looked like Xylophaga dorsalis growing on the outside, but it didn't look as though it was hugely interesting. I got it home and I looked at it, and I had just finished picking off the dorsalis, when I noticed the broken end had bigger holes in it, I cut the piece of timber into 3 bits and split it open with a hammer and chisel, and the picture on the right shows what I found inside. The inside was just riddled with the Xylophaga praestans. This is probably the rarest shell I have, or most sought after shell I have in my collection. It's Helicardia flexuosa. Almost everybody that contacts me about the shells is looking for this species. I have about 4 or 5 specimens that come from west of the Hebrides. One is live, 2 are articulated, and the rest are just single valves. I've given one of my spare single valves to the National Museums of Wales, and it figures on their website. And these ones will eventually end up with the rest of my collection in the National Museums of Scotland. And this last picture is the one that got away. In December last year, my friend Ian Fletcher, who skippers the Roche Marie that I go to sea on very frequently, sent me this picture of a shell that had been picked up on his sister ship, the Star of Jura. It had been collected off Cailleach Point in Mull, and I am reliably informed it's Cassis tuberculosa, because I am no expert on the non-European molluscs, and it was how it got to Cailleach Point in such good condition. I don't know. The questions that come to my mind are, should I have a distribution map for it? Should I enter it or suggest it be entered into the British list? And how did it get there? You know, I tried hard to get the specimen, but Kenny, the skipper of the Star of Jura, was adamant that he was going to take it home for his kids to play with. And I'm not I can't possibly deny his kids the fun of having this a tropical shell in their possession. I can only hope this shell encourages them to collect shells, so that they can have as much pleasure from shell collecting as I have had. But my pessimistic fear is that it won't be too long before shell collecting, as we know it, has the same fate as collecting birds' eggs. And on that pessimistic note, I will end with apologies for overstaying my welcome.
David, thank you very much. I think that was absolutely fantastic. As you say, you may have gone on longer than many of our talks, but the fact that everybody who joined is still with us shows, I think, that the interest that you have generated. Now, your title was The Role of Serendipity in Shell Collecting, and I looked up the meaning of serendipity, and one of the dictionaries defined it as the fact of finding interesting things, interesting or valuable things by chance. I suspect that some of those collections are not enormously valuable, that others are, but certainly they are all interesting. And I think we'd all agree with that. Now, there are lots of questions I could ask you, but I'm just going to limit it to one. How many different species do you have, and what proportion of known species in the Scottish area waters do you think that represents?
I can't tell you how many species, Tom, because I've never counted them. The number of species doesn't interest me per se. But I think that I must have well over 90%, maybe up as high as 95% of the available species in my collection now.
Well, I think that is absolutely amazing. And you said it might eventually or will eventually go to the National Museums of Scotland. I would think that's then going to represent one of the most outstanding collections, probably in most conchological museums anywhere. Anyway, I know time is moving on, but I hope, David, will you answer a few more questions?
I'll answer any questions that I possibly can.
Yeah. Okay. Can we go off screen share and then we can see it, and I can see more easily see who's asking questions. Can you cancel the screen share? Brilliant. Okay, let's have images back. And has anybody got more questions? I'm sure people have. Martin, first. Can you unmute? Yeah.
Yep, I am. Thank you very much. That was an amazing talk. And yeah, I've been listening. 2 hours has disappeared just like that. Fantastic. I was going to ask you a question. This is something that I've talked to Simon about, and we're possibly going to send some sort of representation from the Conchological Society. The proposal of the SNP government to make about, I think it's, I'm not sure whether it's 10% or 20% of Scottish waters on the west coast as extreme marine protected zones, which would mean that people like Simon and myself can't very easily go and visit the shore and collect. So what are your feelings on the proposals, which I have to say,
like everybody else that has any interest in the marine environment that I know of and speak to, we're absolutely 150% against it. As I see it, it does not protect the environment in any way at all. It is, and my experience, and I when I worked in the marine laboratory, I was in at the beginning of the designation of MPAs, and MPAs have become an example of NIMBYism in the marine environment that should have been resisted by administrators but wasn't, and HMPAs will just be an even bigger example of NIMBYism. You know, we need to use the marine environment sensibly. Everybody agrees with that. But whatever is done in the marine environment is not anything like as disturbing to the world environment as a whole as arable farming, for example. You know, and on an arable farm, every piece of existing ecosystem has been destroyed. No matter what people do in the marine environment, whether it's scallop dredging or trawling or shellfish farming or anything, it leaves much of the environment as it was. You know, the animals that were there are there now, were there before, and will be there forevermore. You know, fishing has been going on in this in the environment around Scotland for hundreds of years. Trawling has been going on for more than 100 years. If it was that damaging, there would be nothing left. It would be like an arable farm. When it's ploughed, there was nothing. And that's not true. Yeah, so I don't think it's a good idea. I think there are different ways to manage the environment and different priorities, but banning activities that such as people shell collecting is frankly stupid.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David.
Could I perhaps just before I finish, you perhaps Simon and I could call upon your expertise to help us, or perhaps you could join with.
Simon doesn't need to ask. He bends my ear every time he speaks to me.
Can
Anyway,
we move on?
Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Colin McLeod has asked on the chat, is the desirability of the egg whelk Liomesis ovum possibly due to its similarity of shape to the Indian chank shell Terminella sacred to Hindus? Perhaps specimens are being resold as small chanks?
No, I don't think so. I think that it's just the most difficult whelk to get that's on the lists for under 200 meter, on all the under 200 meter lists. It stands out alone. It's small, Tom, and I think any fishing method that you use, a lot of them get away, and and this is not a pejorative, it doesn't appear in England nearly as often as it appears in Scotland, or in Wales, or in Holland or Belgium, which are the European centres of shell collecting. The number of shell collectors in Scotland could be counted on the fingers of one hand, or maybe two at a huge push. And many of them don't collect local UK shells anyway. So I think that the desirability of the Liomesis is absolutely is down completely to the lack of their appearance in the market.
Thank you. Arwin Edwards asks, super interesting, thanks. I was curious about the orange limpet on human debris. Sounded like the things it was on might have been orange too. Chance or choice on the limpet's part?
No, the cover of the life raft was white, and it was just a piece of a white plastic, and the orange limpet stood out in the daylight. But I would remind everybody that if you go down to 70 meters in the water, in the sea, everything's just shades of grey. Color doesn't matter.
Thank you. Right. Do we have any other questions before we will go on to a very short rest of the business of the meeting? No more then? Okay. Well, David, I think we should all give you a very round warm of thanks. I think many of us will be extremely envious of your collections, and keep on doing it. Thank you.